I love seeing a star being born. This is so exciting. Yay. Yes, it is Homicide. I Am Homicide. There's a lot of homicide in these titles. It's easy to get confused. I Am Homicide.
That's it.
Okay, so Garry, by the way, is CEO and founder of McFadden Solutions.
Yes.
Should you need a solution?
Yeah, I'll find it.
You'll do it. So tell me how this all came to pass.
I retired in 2011, came back July 2011, came back September 1st. Passing my desk, got a phone call from a great production company called Blackfin. They talked me into doing this. We listened, we talked, we listened, and 2 years later, I'm here in New York.
Well, there are a lot of really great detectives out there, but why you? Why did they find you?
They said I had a different style, a different flair. I'm like a pastor at the church or something. And, I can talk my way into the home, so I was a little different. I was a renegade. I kind of worked by myself a lot of times, and they saw that. Of course, like my friend here, Joe, we have a good clearance rate, and we like to put people away. And so they said, hey, let's try this out on TV. Here I am.
So we saw a little clip. Give us a little bit more about the format of the show, I Am Homicide. Tell me what's so special about this particular program.
Well, I Am Homicide came up because most of the time in the community, when I went to the community, people didn't know my name. But I've worked so many murders, they said, oh, that's homicide, that's homicide. They didn't know my name. So they said, I Am Homicide. So we started to talk about it, and like my friend, I'm always say my friend because we have a special relationship. And that's what people don't know.
And that's true.
That's true. We can, if anything happened, I know I can depend on Joe and my wife. Anybody else, we'll work with you. But having that sense to go in and talk, I can talk a lot. That's one thing. I love to talk, I love to interview. So then my story was not scripted. I am really, they're allowing me to talk about these cases, being expressive in my own words. So that is how it's going to play out. Then they have some great actors who are going to portray me in this series. So I tell them the story and they portray it. So it's back and forth. So it was a great thing for me to sit there and read my own cases and actually just talk about it. So it was easy, pretty easy for me.
So there's a theme here. I don't know if I'm hearing the approach, right? How do you deal with a criminal? Joe has a very specific way. You have another way. How do you know when somebody is lying?
Ooh. When they start talking too much to me. I mean, we can tell when we know the question, we know the answers to the questions before we ask them. We don't see how far we have to go before we ever said, that's a lie. So the movement, the looking up, or trying to make up a story, or say, what were you wearing last Thursday? Well, I was wearing a green shirt and blue sneakers. I don't know what I was wearing last Thursday. But they know, so that means they're going to make up a story to try to cover their tracks. And then usually when they walk out, we walk out of the room, we watch the camera and see, did I say that? Did I say that? Yeah. And so we go back in and we capitalize on their mistake.
So right before you came out, Garry, I said I wanted Joe to think about the question, how do you keep light in your life when you're surrounded by such degradation and such disaster, homicide, bad things? How do you stay positive? And if you have children, how do you keep them engaged in a positive way of life?
Well, how I keep my sanity that I find good out of no matter how bad it is. Something that happened in this cruel world is like homicide. I would take something bad that happened, go into the house, work the murder case, and then there could be a child who's standing there. I'll build a relationship with that child. Or several weeks after the trial, after the murder and everything, I would go back and try to help that family. That is what kept me going all these years. One case where it's a 7-year-old little girl, her father was killed, and I kind of rubbed her on the head and said, I'm always going to be here for you. That's a promise. I retired 2011, July 31st. I walked her down the aisle August 1st, 2011. So I kept my promise. So I kept my promise, and if my wife ever tells you, if you want me to do something, bait it with a child. So I go to these communities and talk to these kids, and, and find some sense of hope, and give them some sense of hope. Even if I had put their father father in prison. I didn't put you in prison, and I'm going to explain to you why your father's in prison, so you won't have that hatred for me.
Excellent. It's a great answer and a wonderful addition. So, Detective Kenda, tell me, what is your outlook on
They're almost the same as you find people do incredibly stupid, incredibly violent things. People do what they do. They do it in the presence of children. They do it. They have children of their own. They commit these offenses. I was in court one day. I had a guy who murders his sister-in-law and his wife, and they have a 5-year-old child, a little girl. This girl has lemon meringue hair, wearing her Mary Janes and a little dress, and she could have been on the front cover of Life magazine if Life magazine was still in business. Her grandmother had her in court. She walked up to me and kicked me in the shin, about as hard as I've been kicked, and said, "You put my daddy in jail." And I got down on my knees and I hugged her, and we talked about that for a long time. And I went back and saw her a number of times and kind of did what Garry did. Because you realize that, if you put up a sign that says no parking, 98% of the world won't park there because there's a sign that says not to do that. 2% of the world will park there because the rules don't apply to them. They're special. They do what they want. They hurt who they like. They don't feel compassion, love, guilt, all the things people feel. They don't. But it's only 2% of the world. Only 2%. Everybody else is just fine. And you have to keep remembering that the world is not filled with violent, ugly people. And if you ever go to sleep, the bad guys are going to take over the world. That's nonsense. Deal with what you must. Garry and I dealt with it for most of our adult lives. But try to help those left behind, because there are people left behind. The victim's family is left behind, but so is the suspect's family. They didn't ask to be part of this. They weren't part of the decision to take a life. Their father, their uncle, their grandfather, their mother made that decision on their own, and they suffer for it for a lifetime. So you try to help that as best you can. Can you help everybody? No. But you try.
It's important to keep some positive spin on what you do. And now I'm going to go to you, Garry, as, pardon it, but a rookie in television, right? You've got 287 Twitter followers.
I think we can change that tonight.
Right? Let's up the Twitter profile. I'd like you to ask your colleague here, Lieutenant Joe, a question about what you can expect now that you're entering the world of television. Maybe he can guide you a little bit. What question do you have?
How often do we eat?
There you go. That's a good question. And about it anytime you want. That's what I think about it. They provide an enormous amount of food.
No, I would ask, what should I avoid when I'm being approached by other media or, I guess,
You should think about what you say before you say it, because they're going to tell the world what you said. They are, all right? So be very cautious. People are not your friend. The media is not your friend. They would like you to believe they are, but they're not. So you just be yourself. Be what you've done all your life. Tell the truth. Be careful to avoid controversial subjects. I take Mark Twain's advice. I never discuss religion or politics because it tends to bring out the worst. Yes, and it's true. So you stick with what you know. You answer about what you know, and if you don't know, say you don't know. And you're fine.
That's fair enough. Let's give him a big round of applause. Now,
remarkable change. I can't get on an airplane, go to a restaurant, go anywhere without being recognized. It's odd, and people are nice, they are. But the funniest one yet just happened. I'm walking out of a restaurant in Virginia Beach. I live in that area now. I moved to Virginia because my son's a commander in the Navy. At the end of the day, go where the blood is, and my son's wife has asthma, can't breathe in the altitude. He's a Colorado kid, born and raised. And I said, Dad, I can't come home. I said, that's okay, your mom and I will come to you. So we moved. Anyway, I've come out of this restaurant. This guy in a business suit, I mean, he looks like an intelligent guy. He walks up to me and he says, do you know who you are? And I looked at him and I said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. I have photo ID, you know? And he said, that was really stupid. I said, yes, it was. My name is Joe Kenda, how are you? I'm fairly nice to everybody because I don't like people that aren't. I've been in Hollywood, I've been around those people. Most of them are very nice, some of them are absolute jerks. And I told myself I'd never be like that. So the biggest change, in answer to your question, is being recognized by everybody.
I just want to say one more thing. We love you.
Yes.
Okay, hi. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a homicide detective. And my mother said, no. So now I live vicariously through you. And I would like to know if I can have a hug.
You'd like, I'm sorry?
Or a hug.
Oh, well, that would be nice. We can do that. That's okay. My wife's here, by the way. She's back here at the gift center.
That was easy.
That was easy.
Okay, next.
Well, I'm gonna have to copy off of her and get a hug when I'm done. But every time that my husband and I watch your show, I always think, how did your wife deal with this? And how does your family impact it because you're gone for so many hours, waking up in the middle of the night?
It was very difficult. My kids, particularly when they went to, our kids went to public school, and mine was on the news every night. I was the guy giving the press conference. I was the guy in front of the microphones. Everybody got everybody knew who I was. My kids suffered for that, and particularly in their younger years, and with other smaller kids. They were that cop's kid, you know. They got in a lot of fights because of it. My wife was an exceptionally strong woman and remains that way today. She's a registered nurse. She worked at a city hospital. Occasionally, one of my clients would be a patient, you know, and she would have to go to the head nurse and say, well, I can't have that patient because the hospital rule was hard and fast. Name tag, you better never take that name tag off. They want people to be able to make complaints against employees, whatever. She said, I can't have him as a patient or I have to take my name tag off. Why? And then they would say, oh, your husband. So that would leak into her life. On one particular occasion, this was a scary deal. We had a guy who murdered 5 people in 2 different locations